Hey there, welcome to Design Lab. I'm Adam. I look at comics and art. Let's get started. Today we're looking at Candide, a graphic novel adaptation of Candide. As far as I know, really no, that's not entirely true. But this is the only kind of complete, I think, adaptation of Candide into a graphic novel or comic format that I know of. I did see another one, actually, I just found it today, that's more like an adults only version that didn't get completed. They just did like one issue, like 20 pages. I may look at that in the future. It looks kind of interesting. But strangely enough, I mean, Candide is I think one of the best novels of the 18th century, written by Voltaire, and he was anonymous for a while. Like he published it, and I think they went like 10 years. People were like, "Who wrote this?" And then finally he acknowledged it or something. I've read it so many times, and it's not my favorite novel, but it's a very good novel, and it has a lot of things going for it. It's very short. It's got more than anything, though, I think a really great cast of characters that um, even before I read this comic, it was a very memorable. Most of the characters are pretty memorable. There's a few kind of similar, but overall, I think it's a pretty great novel that everyone should read, especially up to that time. I think it has. I can't think of any other cast of characters except maybe like some characters in Shakespeare and Canterbury Tales, things like that. But I think it's a fun novel that everybody should read. Very violent and bloody novel, and a lot of uh, just a lot of rape and violence, and pretty much every main female character gets raped at some point. So I was wondering how much are they going to show in this graphic novel? Is this going to be more like a graphic novel for all ages, or what's it going to be like? So I was very curious. So let's take a look. It was only published, as far as I know, it's only been published in French. Fortunately, I can read French, and yeah, it's about 150 pages. So let's take a look, dive in. Has some introductory quotes from other authors, basically describing, because they didn't know who wrote Candide. But anyways, my initial impressions of the art was that it was pretty good. Like it was very, it looks almost like an animated type Disney movie almost. I could see this being adapted into a animated movie perhaps. And almost right away, I was recognizing that this is pretty precisely adapted from the novel. Like it was very getting a lot of the little details right. A lot of the quotations were word for word, and overall, like I was like, wow, these guys are really going out of their way to get this right. There were some parts though where like things happened, and I feel like if I hadn't read the novel, I would be kind of unclear why like Candy gets kicked out of the castle, but it's like all we get is like this guy saying Candide, and then Candide's leaving, and they don't really explain that he got kicked out. So it's very sometimes it was a little could be a little clearer, and so Candide he gets kicked out of the castle, he joins the army, and bad things start happening to him, and this is kind of like interesting because they're showing like pretty violent stuff, but there's this also this kind of flippant quality to it, and how it's like I said, like an animated movie or something. So anyways, some of it's pretty good, but then there are parts of it where things happen. Well, I guess not right here. Right here, this is pretty much things are happening as they happen, and we get to see what happens. But one thing in Candide is that there's a lot of people recounting stories of things that happened, lapses in time, characters getting separated and surreptitiously meeting again. It has some of the most amazing coincidences in fiction, not realistic by any means, and pretty much every character that gets killed also gets brought back from the dead. But basically, Candide is trying to get back to this woman that he loves, and he's a very naive fellow, and he's constantly getting into trouble. But then he has people that kind of help him, and he meets his former master. So I was enjoying this. It wasn't great comics, but it was. I thought the art was good. I just feel like some of the the mechanics of the storytelling wasn't as clean as I wanted to be. That's kind of a common thing in comics, is that, especially for adaptations of books, is that they don't use the medium, and this happens in movies too. Like when a book gets taken to a movie, you have to like change things because you're working in a different medium. Oh, so this is an example of what I'm talking about. So like he meets his master, and rather than show what happened, the thing in fiction writing is show don't tell. But I think in comics it's like 10 times stronger than that. It's you got to show, not tell. And instead of showing, we get 8 panels of basically the same kind of thing, which is, I don't know, it's kind of tedious. Nobody wants to read 8 panels with nothing happening but text. We do see some parts of it. It's just like there are too many times when it's just shown. I mean, it's just told and not shown. I like the pages where things happen like this. Like I feel like the mechanics of comics are being used. So, anyways, you can see there's so much happening in this book. I like these pages. I thought they were well done. I think interesting when things were happening. So this is what I was talking about. I said like there's a lot of like violence and rape. Here's how they show I don't know. Actually, I feel like in this scene in the book, it was not a rape. It was like a prostitute that this guy hired. But here, it looks more like a rape. It's like, I don't know. It's unclear. But there's like just such a kind of a flippant attitude to it. It's like kind of sillier and like more jovial, which I don't know if really fit the tone of the book quite well. It didn't quite match it just because of the nature of the illustration. So, anyways, sometimes like you would like show little things like this, which are much more cartoony, which is fine, but it's like sometimes it just doesn't fit the tone of Candide that I think of it. I think if they made a movie of Candide nowadays, which they should, because it's never really been adapted well as a movie. I think there's been a movie version, but it was like they updated it to World War II for some reason, and I haven't seen it. It has a low rating. But I'm saying, like, why can't they adapt Candide? I think they should. I would like to see that movie. Kind of if you've seen that movie, History of the World Part 1, that Mel Brooks movie, I think that's kind of the tone you want to go for with Candide. Like, kind of silly, but also kind of, dark humor. So anyways, that's the first book. What happened to Candide? All right, so book 2. This is Cacambo, the guy that, I think he's from South America, who's like a servant to Candide. He kind of plays a larger role. His introduction is kind of weird in the book because he's with them from earlier, but they say they don't really introduce him until he's actually needed as a character. So anyways, here's an instance of recounting, what's her name? I'm blanking on her name. Oh, Cunegunda, when she gets raped, and then like, it's just like, like the way like nudity and stuff is shown in the book is like kind of cartoony, but also kind of like just kind of weird. And also like in the book, she always denies that she slept with anyone except that first time that she's raped, but there seems to be like hints that she actually does sleep with them all. I think Voltaire kind of left that ambiguous, but in the comic they kind of disambiguate it. So here's another example of Candide accidentally killing this guy, or killing him on purpose, but kind of and like the way things are shown is just, it kind of works. It's just not, I don't know, like I feel like this is, like I said, so adapted and so precisely to include pretty much all the details that it's like, why don't you just read the book? It'll probably take you just as long. But the good thing about it is, I guess maybe if you're struggling with the book, if let's say you're a teenager and you're like, I don't want to read this book, but you like pictures, maybe this is helpful. I think that would be like an instance. Like you can read this before you read the book, or in place of reading the book for your test in English class. Some of the art's pretty good though. Like a lot of the crowd scenes, a lot of architecture, pretty well done. All the characters look pretty easy to distinguish and memorable. This, I mean, just this art right here, like he's really good at getting some of the character faces well, and like showing things that are happening. Um, like Candide's face here is funny to me because he's kind of listening, but he's well, well, she's arguing. Kunigunda is arguing with the old woman, and I just thought it was funny. Like some of the, it's almost like the character faces are better than the story, and but when I see all this text, this is like too much text. This is like too thick. It slows the narrative down and it doesn't work well. Nobody wants to. There's even worse pages in terms of the blocks of text. But I like the art here. Look at the change in art. We get the flashback of the old woman, and I always find it funny that all we ever know of her name is the old woman, and we never get a name. It's just that's her name, the old woman. So, but I like to have the art change and becomes almost like a more of a woodcut style or something. More line work. It's a good decision. No, and this is where she gets they like remove pieces of her ass to eat them when they're instead of cannibalizing her completely. That's the kind of thing. It's like a little too adult for a kid's graphic novel, but I feel like if they had made this totally more adult, they could have made it even more graphic and cruder. But they kind of walked the line and made something a little more PG-13 than the actual original book. So Candide and Kunigunda get split up again. I kind of prefer in the novel the original, the first half of the book, before they go to El Dorado, the kind of fantasy country, because before then it seems like there's a lot more danger and lots more travails that they suffer. But then after that, it's like they still have problems, but it's more like a society book, and because of that, I think the first half of the graphic novel is more interesting. So this is another one of the amazing coincidences. Candide runs into the brother of Kunigunda, which there's just so many ridiculous coincidences in this book. Now this page I thought was funny because look, they're meeting and at first also like Candide never recognizes them at first. He's like, I don't know how they don't recognize each other. So they recognize each other and they're at dinner or something, and they're happy. And then the next page, there's like they knock the table over. It's like what happened? It's like how did that happen? Like they greet each other and then boom, the table's knocked over. That was weird. I didn't understand that at all. Oh, and then this is an example I think of a wasted page. It's just like somebody talking and like the artist is trying to make it as interesting as possible, but it's just somebody talking and having him eat doesn't really make it more exciting. So Candide, like, says he's going to marry Kunigunda, and Kunigunda's brother is like, no, and he accidentally kills him. So, and then this is the part where they start getting near El Dorado, and they see these monkeys chasing these women, and Candide shoots the monkeys. And then it turns out they're the lovers of the women because I think Voltaire just kind of like back then people like knew so little about the outside world. They would just make shit up and it was just ridiculous. But so they're crying over their monkey lovers, and then Candide's going to get killed because they think he's a Jesuit. And then it turns out he's not a Jesuit, and then they release him. Great art here, I thought. To draw this many characters, a lot of work. I thought Cacambo he's one of the most interesting characters in the book. And I think when they kind of switch to a new sidekick, Martin, who's this kind of morbidly depressed guy, I think he's a less interesting Cacambo. And the way they switch it in the book is kind of, you don't distinguish the characters as much. But I think in the comic, because they look different, their facial expressions are different, it's a little clearer, the difference between the two guys. So anyways, I like how that they're going to eat them, and then they realize he's not a Jesuit, and then they free him, and then all of a sudden they're naked, and they have a naked woman on their lap, each of them, which is just funny. Although you think they'd be kind of disappointed that don't get a free meal out of eating Candide. Anyways, Candide wanders around, and then they find El Dorado. I thought this panel was pretty good. This to show the passage of time and the distance through the country, rather than they don't use a caption at all. All they do is show, different landscapes, and obviously because they're such completely different landscapes, it applies a passage of time. Great cavern shot, great nature shots. Yeah, this guy is really good at drawing like nature, I think. And they get to El Dorado, where there's money there's like coins and diamonds and rubies in the streets, and everyone's rich and nobody suffers. It's like perfect place. I don't know why Voltaire decided to include this part. It's kind of, I was thinking about like the structure of the book. If you view it as kind of three sections, the first one might be, it's kind of like Dante's Divine Comedy, but in a different order. The first section is kind of the Inferno, the hellish parts, where Candide just suffers and suffers. The second part is kind of like Paradise, where it's like everything's perfect, nobody suffers, nobody has to work, and everyone's happy. And then the third part's kind of like a mix. It's like not as hellish, but it's not quite the Paradise either. Maybe Voltaire had that in mind, Divine Comedy, when he was doing it. I don't know. Anyways, so they leave El Dorado. Yeah, great. Look at these like character expressions. These could be like, it just looks like an animated movie. So I would love to see this as an animated movie. I just feel like this script is too close to the book. You need to change it, make it a little smoother, get rid of all this. This is way too much just naughty, unnecessary dialogue, and just have a writer come in and clean it up. But some of these images are great. This is like, it reminds me of DuckTales. They would always go on these adventurous quests, or Lost Horizon, that movie. All right, so they take a bunch of jewels and stuff back to civilization, but they lose a lot of them. And Candide, just because he's so innocent and stupid, he just keeps losing money. Okay, and then he sends Cacambo to get Cunegonde to pay for her and release her, and then he gets a new sidekick, Martin, this guy who never smiled. He's always sad, and Candide gets one of his sheep back, but he loses the money. This is what I'm talking about. This is a horrible page in terms of comics. It works better in print, but like it's just these are enormous blocks of text, and nothing is happening in these images except birds flying. That's the most interesting thing that they can come up with. And again, I'm not blaming the artist. I think the artist was working with the text, but this is ridiculous. You don't want this much text with nothing happening. You got to keep it moving. So Candide goes back to Europe, and he goes to Paris, and he gambles and loses more money, and people take advantage of him, and he wears wigs and basically this section is Voltaire parodying and commenting on high society in Paris and in France in general. Blah 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 blah. And I don't like this section of the book is much less interesting to me. Like basically everything after El Dorado is less interesting. And another amazing coincidence, Candide meets another acquaintance, Paquette, and again we get these nice flashbacks in a different art style, kind of a gray tone. And then Martin proves again that everyone's miserable. There's this guy with 1 million books, and he knows all about music and all about theater, but he's miserable. All he does is complain. And then finally, Candide meets with Cacambo again. And again, this scene with these kings, in which these guys all say they're kings. I don't know if they're just scammers or what, but it's like unnecessary. You could have like easily cut this out of the story entirely, but because they wanted to be accurate to the book, you get these enormous blocks of text, each of these guys is basically the same character. It's unnecessary. We don't need it. Like way too much text. Way too much text. Could have spread this out more. And then another coincidence. Candide meets his old philosopher master and the guy he thought he killed, the brother of Cunegonde. So I think, like this, you can't take it seriously because obviously all these coincidences aren't going to happen. But if you get the right tone, like this right silliness that I'm talking about, History of the World Part 1, then you might be able to pull it off as a movie. Maybe make it a musical. So I thought this is kind of interesting. He gets to meet Cunegonde again, but now she's old and ugly. Or I don't know, she gets these warts or something on her face. I don't know how she changed so quickly. I guess hard times. Life is rough. But this is what she looks like now. Candide still wants to marry her because he's a gentleman. He pays for her release. He kind of remembers how she used to look. And but the brother's still mad. This was kind of unclear. I don't remember exactly what happened to him in the book. Like if they like sold him back into slavery or something. But the implication here is that they kind of cart him off on a ship and he just disappears from the narrative. And then I wasn't clear about what happens, but somehow their farm doesn't quite succeed. And they kind of try and figure out how to be happy again. And there's this philosophical section about, you got to mind your garden. And then that's pretty much the end of the book. They're living together, but not quite happy, but not quite miserable. And so life goes on. Candy becomes old, and we have to cultivate our garden. And then we get a kind of a flashback on the whole book as a whole. What is this section here? Where this guy's, I don't know who this is, grabbing this woman. I don't remember this part. Okay, so anyways, that's the end of the book. So my overall take is that it was a bit of a slog in some parts. I feel like the art was great for the most part. I just feel like the script wasn't. I think I've said that in so many recent videos. Great art, but not the best adaptation as a comic. And I'll probably take a look at that other comic. I think it's called Candide Revealed, and it was supposed to be a longer series, but only one issue was published. If you want more Candide, if you want more comics adaptations, I have a ton of great comic things that I'm looking at in the next few days, near future. I have the Alan Moore Magic book coming. I have this comic from Neil Gaiman, who I haven't really talked about, who's kind of been in hot water in the last few months. What's going on with Neil Gaiman? We're going to take a look at one of his old comics that you've probably never seen. It's this adults-only comic, Cherry, that he wrote a story for. And then what else do I got coming? I have a Milo Manara adaptation of The Life of Caravaggio that's coming out. I'm going to look at an earlier edition that's already available, but the English edition's coming soon. A lot of tons of stuff coming. So stay tuned, and we'll look at more comics together. See you there. Bye.